didn't choose this marriage. She didn't choose him. But what if the man behind the war paint wasn't a monster, but a protector, a leader, maybe even something more? Stay with us as this unexpected journey unfolds in a land of danger, duty, and the kind of love that defies every legend. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Wyoming Territory stretched vast and unforgiving beneath the scorching summer sun of 1876, its golden plains rippling like an ocean of grass that seemed to breathe with the wind. Sarah Jane Morrison stood at the edge of Fort Laramie, her emerald eyes fixed on the distant horizon where the land met the sky in a hazy blur of heat and dust. Her chestnut hair, carefully pinned beneath a simple bonnet, caught the afternoon light as she gripped the wooden railing of the fort's observation platform, her knuckles white with tension. She had arrived at the fort 3 months ago with her father, Colonel William Morrison, a stern military man whose reputation for negotiating peace treaties with the native tribes had brought them to this remote outpost. Sarah had imagined adventure, perhaps even romance in this wild frontier, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality that now faced her. The weight of her father's decision pressed upon her chest like a stone, making each breath feel labored and desperate. "You understand the gravity of this situation, Sarah." Her father's voice echoed in her memory from their conversation just hours before. "Chief Tahatan of the Northern Cheyenne has agreed to a peace treaty, but only if we honor their customs. They've requested a union between our peoples as a sign of good faith. You are the only unmarried woman of appropriate age at this fort." Sarah had stared at him in disbelief, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're asking me to marry a savage? A war chief whose very name makes grown men tremble? Father, surely there must be another way." Colonel Morrison's steel-gray eyes had softened for just a moment, revealing the conflict beneath his military bearing. "His name is Tahatan, which means windhawk in their tongue. He's led his warriors in countless battles, yes, but he's also shown remarkable restraint in recent conflicts. The alternative is war, Sarah. Hundreds will die on both sides, women and children. The responsibility I carry weighs heavily upon me, but I must think of the greater good. This alliance could bring lasting peace to the territory." Now, as Sarah stood watching the sun descend toward the mountains, she saw them approaching. A group of Cheyenne warriors rode across the plains with a grace and confidence that seemed born of the land itself. At their head rode a man whose presence commanded attention, even from this distance. Tahatan sat astride a magnificent paint horse, his broad shoulders bare except for the traditional breastplate adorned with bone and beadwork. His long black hair flowed freely in the wind, and even from afar, Sarah could sense the power that emanated from him like heat from a flame. Her stomach twisted with fear, and something else she couldn't quite name. She had heard the stories whispered by the soldiers, tales of Tahatan's ferocity in battle, how he had single-handedly fought off 6 enemy warriors to protect his village, how his tactical brilliance had outmaneuvered cavalry units twice the size of his war party. They called him the Ghost Warrior, because he seemed to appear and disappear like smoke on the wind. But they also spoke of his unwavering honor, how he had never harmed women or children, how he had once carried a wounded soldier to safety, rather than leave him to die in the elements. Lieutenant Robert Hayes appeared at her side, his young face creased with concern. "Miss Morrison, your father requests your presence in the main hall. The Cheyenne delegation has arrived." His voice carried sympathy, and Sarah appreciated his kindness. Robert had been a friend since her arrival, one of the few people who treated her as more than just the colonel's daughter. Sarah nodded, smoothing the fabric of her simple green dress. She had chosen it deliberately, rejecting the elaborate gowns her father had suggested. If she was to be bartered like cattle, she would at least maintain her dignity. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Tell my father I'll be there momentarily." As Robert departed, Sarah took one last moment to gather her courage. She thought of her mother, who had died of fever when Sarah was just 15, and wondered what advice she would have given. Her mother had always been the voice of compassion and understanding in their household, balancing her father's military rigidity with warmth and wisdom. "Be strong, but keep your heart open." She could almost hear her mother's gentle voice. Sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest blessings. The main hall of Fort Laramie was filled with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Colonel Morrison stood at one end of the long wooden table, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid. Beside him stood Major Thomas Crawford and several other officers, their hands resting near their sidearms despite the peace negotiations. On the other side of the table stood the Cheyenne delegation. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she entered, and saw Tahatan for the first time up close. He was magnificent in a way that defied the brutal descriptions she had heard. Standing well over 6 feet tall, his muscular frame spoke of strength honed by years of survival in harsh conditions. His face was angular and proud, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, but it was his eyes that captured her attention, deep brown eyes that held an intelligence and depth that surprised her. They were not the eyes of a mindless savage, but of a man who had seen much, suffered much, and carried the weight of his people's survival on his shoulders. He wore traditional Cheyenne regalia, buckskin leggings decorated with intricate quill work, and a shirt adorned with symbols Sarah didn't understand. Eagle feathers hung from his hair, marking his status as a war chief. Around his neck hung a bear claw necklace, each claw as long as her finger. Yet despite his fearsome appearance, there was a calmness about him, a stillness that suggested absolute control. Their eyes met across the room, and Sarah felt a jolt run through her body like lightning. Tahatan's expression remained neutral, but she saw something flicker in those dark eyes gone too quickly for her to interpret. Was it curiosity? Regret? She couldn't tell. "Ah, Sarah, there you are." Her father's voice boomed across the hall. "Chief Tahatan, may I present my daughter, Sarah Jane Morrison." He spoke slowly as an interpreter. An older Cheyenne man named Gray Wolf translated his words. Tahatan stepped forward with fluid grace, and Sarah noticed how the other warriors deferred to him with subtle gestures of respect. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, each word carefully chosen. Gray Wolf translated, "The daughter of Colonel Morrison carries the beauty of the morning star. It is an honor to meet the woman who will bridge our peoples." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, though whether from embarrassment or anger at being discussed like property, she wasn't certain. She curtsied slightly, maintaining eye contact with Tahatan in a small act of defiance. "Chief Tahatan, the honor is mine, though I confess this arrangement comes as quite a surprise to me." When her words were translated, Sarah thought she saw the corner of Tahatan's mouth twitch, almost as if he found her honesty amusing. He responded, and Gray Wolf translated, "Honesty is valued among my people. I too find myself in unexpected circumstances, but we do what we must for those we protect." The formalities continued for what felt like hours. Treaties were signed, terms were discussed, and through it all, Sarah felt Tahatan's gaze return to her repeatedly. Each time their eyes met, she felt that same electric connection, disturbing in its intensity. This was supposed to be a simple political arrangement, a sacrifice for peace. So why did her heart race when he looked at her? Why did she find herself studying the strong lines of his face, the proud set of his shoulders, the way he moved with such confidence and grace? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, her father announced, "The ceremony will take place in 3 days' time. This will allow both parties to prepare appropriately. Chief Tahatan, you and your men are welcome to make camp near the fort. We will provide provisions as a gesture of goodwill." Tahatan nodded his acceptance, then did something unexpected. He reached into a leather pouch at his side and withdrew something, walking directly to Sarah. The soldiers tensed, hands moving to their weapons, but Colonel Morrison raised a hand to stop them. Tahatan stood before Sarah, towering over her 5'5" frame, and held out his hand. In his palm lay a delicate pendant, a small silver disc etched with symbols, and hanging from a leather cord. Through Gray Wolf, he said, "Among my people, it is customary for a man to present his intended with a gift. This belonged to my mother. She was a woman of great strength and wisdom. I offer it to you as a symbol of respect." His eyes held hers as he spoke, and Sarah saw something in them that made her breath catch, a vulnerability quickly masked but unmistakably present. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached out to accept the pendant. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and she felt warmth spread from that point of contact up her arm. "Thank you, Chief Tahatan. I will treasure it." Her voice came out softer than she intended, and she saw something shift in his expression, a gentling around his eyes that transformed his stern features into something almost tender. As the Cheyenne delegation departed, Sarah stood holding the pendant, her mind whirling with confusion and fear, and something else entirely. In 3 days, she would become the wife of a legendary war chief, leaving behind everything she had known. The prospect terrified her, yet as she watched Tahatan ride away into the gathering dusk, his powerful form silhouetted against the dying light, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with a possibility she hadn't dared to imagine. The morning of the second day dawned clear and bright, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost too beautiful for the turmoil raging in Sarah's heart. She had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of the previous day's meeting, every glance exchanged with Tahatan, every word spoken. The pendant he had given her lay on her nightstand, catching the early light, and she found herself reaching for it, tracing the intricate symbols with her fingertips as if they might reveal some hidden truth about the man who would soon be her husband. A knock at her door interrupted her reverie. "Miss Sarah, it's Lieutenant Hayes. Your father requests that you join him for breakfast, and there's someone here to see you." Sarah dressed quickly in a simple blue cotton dress, pinning her hair back in a modest style. When she entered the dining hall, she was surprised to find not only her father, but also Grey Wolf, the Cheyenne interpreter, waiting for her. The older man's weathered face bore a kind expression that immediately put her somewhat at ease. "Good morning, Sarah," her father said, his tone gentler than usual. "Grey Wolf has come with a message from Chief Tahatan. He wishes to speak with you privately before the ceremony. It's unconventional, but I've agreed to allow it, provided Lieutenant Hayes accompanies you as a chaperone." Sarah's pulse quickened. "He wants to speak with me? Why?" The question came out more sharply than she intended, her nerves making her defensive. Grey Wolf smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with warmth. "Chief Tahatan believes that understanding between husband and wife is the foundation of a strong union. He wishes to know you, and for you to know him, before you are bound together. It is his way of showing respect for you as a person, not merely as a political necessity." The words struck Sarah deeply. In all her anxious thoughts about this arrangement, she had never considered that Tahatan might be feeling similar uncertainty, that he too might wish to bridge the vast cultural divide between them. I would be willing to meet with him," she said quietly, looking at her father. "Where and when?" "There's a grove of cottonwood trees about a mile north of the fort, near the creek," her father explained. "It's neutral ground. Grey Wolf will guide you there after breakfast, and Lieutenant Hayes will remain within sight but at a respectful distance. I trust you'll conduct yourself appropriately, Sarah." An hour later, Sarah found herself riding alongside Grey Wolf on a gentle mare, her heart hammering with each step that brought her closer to the meeting place. The morning air was fresh and clean, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Lieutenant Hayes followed at a distance, his presence reassuring yet allowing the illusion of privacy. The cottonwood grove appeared like an oasis on the prairie, its leafy canopy providing welcome shade from the already warming sun. The creek bubbled and sang over smooth stones, creating a peaceful melody that seemed at odds with Sarah's nervous tension. As they approached, she saw Tahatan standing beside the water, his back to them as he gazed out across the landscape. He had heard their approach, she was certain, but he allowed them time to arrive without rushing to meet them. Grey Wolf helped Sarah dismount, then spoke quietly in Cheyenne to Tahatan. The war chief turned, and once again Sarah was struck by the power of his presence. Today he wore simpler clothing, buckskin pants and a shirt without the elaborate ceremonial decorations, but he was no less imposing. His hair was loose, falling past his shoulders in thick black waves, and in the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, she could see the strong planes of his face more clearly, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the fullness of his lips. "I will translate for you both," Grey Wolf said, positioning himself to the side. "Chief Tahatan wishes to speak openly with you, Miss Morrison, about the path that lies ahead." Tahatan spoke, his voice carrying that same resonant quality Sarah remembered, and Grey Wolf translated. "Thank you for coming. I know this arrangement is not of your choosing, just as it is not entirely of mine. But I believe we owe each other honesty and the chance to speak freely, without the weight of our fathers and their expectations pressing down upon us. Sarah felt some of her tension ease at his words. She straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. I appreciate your candor, Chief Tahatan. You're right that I did not choose this path, but I understand the necessity of it. What I don't understand is you. The stories I've heard paint you as a fierce warrior, a man who has known only battle and bloodshed. Yet you stand before me speaking of honesty and understanding. Which is the real you? A ghost of a smile touched Tahatan's lips as Grey Wolf translated her bold question. He walked closer, stopping a respectful distance from her, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was choosing them with great care. I am both, and I am neither, Grey Wolf translated. Yes, I am a warrior. I have fought to protect my people, to defend our hunting grounds, to ensure our children have food and our elders have shelter. I have killed when necessary, and I carry those souls with me every day. But I am also a man who values peace, who understands that endless war serves no one. I have seen too many friends fall, too many mothers weep for their sons. When your father proposed this alliance, I saw an opportunity to perhaps end the cycle of violence, at least in this territory. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers, and Sarah felt the sincerity in his words like a physical force. But I will tell you truly, Sarah Morrison, I did not expect to feel anything beyond duty when I agreed to this marriage. I expected to fulfill an obligation and nothing more. Yet when I saw you yesterday, when our eyes met across that room, I felt something I have not felt in many years. Hope. Hope that perhaps this union might be more than just a political arrangement. Hope that I might find not just a wife, but a companion, someone who could understand both the warrior and the man. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The vulnerability in his admission shocked her, and she found herself responding with equal honesty. I was terrified yesterday. I'm still terrified now. Everything I've known, everything I've been taught, tells me that our worlds are too different, that this can never work. But I would be lying if I said I didn't feel something when we met. Something I can't quite name or understand. Frightens me because it challenges everything I believed about who you are, about who I am, about what this marriage must be. Tahatan listened intently to the translation, and when Grey Wolf finished, he nodded slowly. He said something in Cheyenne, and Grey Wolf hesitated before translating, his expression thoughtful. Chief Tahatan says, "Fear is not weakness. Fear is wisdom that keeps us alive. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward despite it. Perhaps we can be courageous together and learn to build something neither of us expected but both of us need." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, though she blinked them back stubbornly. I don't know how to be a Cheyenne wife. I don't know your customs, your language, your ways. What if I fail? What if I bring dishonor to you and your people? This time, Tahatan did something that surprised everyone present. He took a step closer and very gently reached out to touch Sarah's hand. His palm was warm and calloused from years of wielding weapons and working with his hands, but his touch was remarkably gentle. He spoke directly to her, and though she couldn't understand the Cheyenne words, she heard the sincerity in his tone. Grey Wolf translated softly, "You honor me by your concern, but you cannot dishonor what is freely given. I do not expect you to become someone you are not. I ask only that you try, as I will try to understand your world as well. We will learn together, and where you stumble, I will steady you, and perhaps when I stumble in your world, you will do the same for me." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and promise. Sarah realized she was holding Tahatan's hand now. Her fingers curled around his, and the contact felt natural, right in a way she couldn't explain. "I will try," she whispered. "I promise I will try." They spent the next 2 hours by the creek, talking through Grey Wolf's patient translation about everything and nothing. Tahatan told her about his childhood, how he had been orphaned young when a disease swept through his village, how he had been raised by his uncle who taught him to be both strong and compassionate. He spoke of his love for his people, the weight of leadership, the loneliness of making decisions that affected so many lives. Sarah shared her own story, her mother's death, her father's increasing distance as he buried himself in military duty, her dreams of adventure that had brought her west, and the reality that had proved far more complicated than any fantasy. As the sun climbed higher, painting the grove in shifting patterns of light and shadow, Sarah found herself laughing at something Tahatan said about his first attempt at hunting buffalo, how he had been so nervous he had fallen off his horse before even drawing his bow. The sound of her laughter seemed to please him, and she noticed how his stern features softened when he smiled, how his eyes crinkled at the corners in a way that made him look younger, less burdened. "There is something else I must tell you," Tahatan said through Grey Wolf, his expression growing serious once more. "My people have concerns about this marriage, just as yours do. There are warriors who believe I am betraying our traditions, that any alliance with the white soldiers is a path to our destruction. I tell you this not to frighten you, but so you understand that we will face challenges from both sides. But I give you my word, Sarah Morrison, that I will protect you with my life. No harm will come to you while I draw breath." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shiver through Sarah that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the realization that this man, this legendary war chief, was promising to stand between her and all threats. "And I promise," she said quietly, "that I will try to be worthy of that protection. I will try to be a bridge between our peoples, not a wedge that drives them further apart." When it was time to return to the fort, Tahatan walked Sarah back to where Lieutenant Hayes waited with the horses. Before she mounted, he spoke one final time, and Grey Wolf translated with a knowing smile. "Tomorrow we will be married in both Cheyenne and white traditions. I look forward to beginning our journey together, Sarah. May you rest well tonight, for tomorrow everything changes for both of us." As Sarah rode back to Fort Laramie, she touched the pendant at her throat, the one Tahatan's mother had worn, and felt the weight of what was to come settling over her like a mantle. But mixed with the fear was something else now, something warm and hopeful that flickered in her chest like a candle flame. Perhaps, just perhaps, this arranged marriage might become something neither of them had dared to imagine, something real and true and worth fighting for. That evening, as Sarah prepared for bed, she found a small bundle outside her door. Inside was a beautiful dress of soft white doeskin, decorated with intricate beadwork in shades of blue and white, with fringe along the sleeves and hem. A note in careful English script read simply, "For tomorrow, may you feel beautiful as you are." There was no signature, but Sarah knew it was from Tahatan, and she held the dress to her chest, her heart full of emotions too complex to name. The dawn of the wedding day broke over the Wyoming plains with a brilliance that seemed almost prophetic, as if the heavens themselves were blessing the union that would join two worlds in ways neither could fully comprehend. Sarah stood before the small mirror in her quarters, her reflection showing a woman transformed. The white doeskin dress Tahatan had given her fit perfectly, hugging her curves before flowing gracefully to her ankles, the beadwork catching the morning light like captured stars. Her chestnut hair hung loose down her back, as was traditional for Cheyenne brides, with only a few small braids woven with blue beads framing her face. Her father entered without knocking, stopping short when he saw her. Colonel William Morrison's stern military bearing cracked for just a moment, and Sarah saw moisture gather in his eyes before he blinked it away. "You look so much like your mother," he said hoarsely. "She would be proud of your courage, Sarah. I know I haven't said it enough, but I am proud of you too. What you're doing today, it takes a strength most soldiers will never possess." Sarah turned to face him fully, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. "Father, I need to know something. Did you truly believe this was the only way? Or did you see something in Chief Tahatan that made you think this might actually work?" The colonel walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose Sarah had seen 1,000 times. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of experience and perhaps regret. "When I first met Tahatan 3 months ago during preliminary negotiations, I expected to find a savage, a brute who communicated only through violence. Instead, I found a man of remarkable intelligence and honor. He asked about you, Sarah, not in the way men usually inquire about potential brides, but about who you were as a person, your interests, your education, your character. He wanted to know if you were kind, if you had courage, if you possessed the strength to face hardship. And when I told him about you, about how you nursed soldiers through fever, how you taught the children at the fort to read, how you never complained about the harsh conditions here, I saw respect in his eyes. Real respect. That's when I knew, perhaps this arranged marriage might become something more, something genuine. The confession settled over Sarah like a blanket, warm and unexpected. Her father had been thinking of her happiness, not just political expediency. "Thank you for telling me that," she whispered. "It helps more than you know." The ceremony was planned for midday in the open ground between Fort Laramie and the Cheyenne encampment, a symbolic middle ground where both cultures would witness the union. As Sarah walked toward the ceremonial space with her father, she saw the gathering that had assembled. On one side stood the soldiers and fort civilians, dressed in their finest uniforms and dresses. On the other stood the Cheyenne, a sea of traditional regalia, feathers, and decorated buckskins that spoke of a rich culture Sarah was only beginning to understand. And there, standing at the center where the two groups met, was Tahatan. Sarah's breath caught in her throat at the sight of him. He wore full ceremonial dress, his chest bare except for an elaborate breastplate of bone and turquoise, his buckskin leggings decorated with quill work that must have taken months to create. Eagle feathers adorned his long black hair, and war paint marked his face in traditional patterns. He was magnificent, powerful, and utterly breathtaking, but it was his eyes that captured her attention. Those deep brown eyes that found hers across the distance and held steady, filled with an emotion so intense, it made her knees weak. Grey Wolf stood between Tahatan and the fort's chaplain, Father Michael O'Brien, ready to facilitate both ceremonies. The older interpreter's face bore a solemn expression as he gestured for the ceremony to begin. "We gather today to witness a union that bridges two peoples, two cultures, two ways of life. May the Great Spirit and the Christian God both bless this joining and guide these two souls toward understanding and peace." The Cheyenne ceremony came first. Tahatan's uncle, a distinguished elder named White Eagle, stepped forward and began to speak in the melodious Cheyenne tongue. Grey Wolf translated for the assembled crowd. "In the way of our people, marriage is not just the joining of two individuals, but the weaving together of two spirits, two families, two destinies. Chief Tahatan, known as Windhawk, warrior and protector of the Northern Cheyenne, stands before us ready to take this woman into his lodge, to provide for her, to protect her, to honor her as the mother of his future children and the keeper of his heart." Sarah felt her pulse race at those words. The reality of what she was doing, of the life she was choosing, crashed over her with the force of a river breaking through a dam. But when Tahatan extended his hand toward her, when she saw the mixture of strength and vulnerability in his expression, she found herself stepping forward without hesitation. White Eagle continued, "Sarah Jane Morrison, daughter of the soldier chief, do you come to this union freely? Do you accept Windhawk as your husband, to stand beside him in times of plenty and times of hardship, to learn our ways while maintaining your own spirit, to be a bridge between our peoples?" Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong across the gathered assembly. "I do. I accept this union freely and with an open heart." The words felt right, felt true in a way she hadn't expected. She wasn't just reciting vows. She was making a choice, perhaps the first truly autonomous choice of her life. Tahatan spoke then, his deep voice carrying across the space as Grey Wolf translated. "I, Tahatan, called Windhawk, take Sarah Jane Morrison as my wife before the Great Spirit and before all our peoples. I vow to protect her, to provide for her, to respect her spirit and her strength. I vow to learn from her as she learns from me, to build a life together that honors both the world she comes from and the world I offer her. I vow to cherish her not as property or political necessity, but as a partner, a companion, and the woman who holds my heart." The last words sent a shock through Sarah. Holds my heart. He hadn't been required to say that. It wasn't part of the traditional vows. He had added it himself, a declaration that transcended duty and entered the realm of genuine feeling. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as White Eagle wrapped a beautiful blanket around both their shoulders, symbolizing their unity. The Cheyenne people began to sing, a haunting melody that spoke of love and sacrifice and the enduring nature of commitment. Father O'Brien stepped forward then, his weathered face kind beneath his white hair. And now, in the sight of God and this congregation, we perform the Christian rites of matrimony. Tahatan, known among your people as Windhawk, do you take Sarah Jane Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Tahatan looked directly at Sarah as he spoke, and though Grey Wolf translated his Cheyenne words into English, Sarah was learning to hear the emotion beneath the unfamiliar language. I do, with all that I am, and all that I will become. And Sarah Jane Morrison, do you take Tahatan to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health? Until death do you part? Sarah's voice trembled but held strong. I do, with all my heart and all my courage. Then by the power vested in me, and in accordance with both Cheyenne tradition and Christian law, I pronounce you husband and wife. Chief Tahatan, you may kiss your bride. For a moment, Tahatan seemed uncertain, perhaps unfamiliar with this particular white custom. But then he stepped closer, his large hands coming up to gently cup Sarah's face, with a tenderness that belied his warrior's reputation. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, but Sarah found herself rising on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips touched, and it was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. The kiss was gentle but sure, brief but meaningful, and when they parted, Sarah saw in Tahatan's eyes a promise of things to come, of passion and partnership, and a future they would build together. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the Wyoming Territory had ever seen. Cheyenne and soldiers mingled cautiously at first, then with growing ease as food was shared and music played. The fort's musicians brought out fiddles and harmonicas while Cheyenne drummers beat out ancient rhythms. Children from both communities, the most honest and open of all present, began to play together, their laughter a symbol of hope for what this union might mean for future generations. As evening approached and the celebration continued, Tahatan took Sarah's hand and led her away from the crowds toward a beautifully decorated lodge that had been prepared at the edge of the Cheyenne encampment. Sarah's heart raced with nervousness and anticipation. This would be her new home, at least for now, until they could establish a more permanent arrangement. Inside, the lodge was surprisingly comfortable and beautiful. Soft furs covered the ground. A small fire burned in the center, providing warmth and light, and Sarah's few belongings had been carefully arranged alongside Cheyenne artifacts and decorations. It was a space that belonged to both of them, both cultures, both worlds. Tahatan turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw genuine nervousness in his expression. He spoke in halting English, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar language. I learn your words. For you. Is important. We speak together. No, always need Grey Wolf. Sarah's heart melted at his effort. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. And I will learn your language. We'll teach each other. Everything we need to know we'll discover together. He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips, a gesture that was both tender and passionate. Sarah. He said her name carefully, savoring each syllable. I tell you true thing. When I agree this marriage, I think only duty, only peace for my people. But when I see you, when I know you, everything change. You are brave, you are strong, you are beautiful, yes, but more, you have good spirit, kind heart. I feel here. He placed her hand over his heart, and Sarah felt the strong, steady beat beneath her palm. I feel something I not expect, something I want protect, want grow. You understand? Sarah understood perfectly. She had felt it too, that unexpected connection that had bloomed between them despite every obstacle, despite every reason it shouldn't work. I understand, she whispered, because I feel it too. I was so afraid of you, afraid of this marriage, afraid of losing myself. But instead, I think I might have found something I didn't even know I was searching for. I found you. The kiss they shared then was different from the chaste wedding kiss before the crowd. This was private, passionate, a promise of the intimacy they would share and the life they would build. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily, their foreheads pressed together as they simply existed in the moment. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery for both Sarah and Tahatan. True to his word, Tahatan worked diligently to learn English, spending hours each day with Sarah as she taught him, correcting his pronunciation with gentle patience. In turn, he taught her Cheyenne, introducing her to the flowing, musical language of his people. They laughed together at each other's mistakes, celebrated each small victory of understanding, and slowly built a language that was uniquely their own, a mixture of both tongues supplemented with gestures and expressions that needed no translation. Sarah learned the ways of the Cheyenne women, how to tan hides, how to prepare traditional foods, how to maintain the lodge. The Cheyenne women, initially suspicious of this white woman in their midst, gradually warmed to her genuine efforts and open heart. She learned about medicinal plants from the elder women, combining this knowledge with her own understanding of medicine to help treat illnesses in the camp. Her willingness to work alongside them, to get her hands dirty and never complain about the difficult labor, earned their respect. Tahatan, in turn, made efforts to understand Sarah's world. He visited the fort regularly, learning about military structure and strategy, understanding the pressures and concerns of the soldiers. His intelligence and tactical brilliance impressed even the most skeptical officers, and slowly, grudgingly, respect grew on both sides. But their greatest triumph came 3 months after their wedding, when a group of young warriors from a rival tribe attempted to raid near the fort. Tahatan, rather than leading his warriors to war as he might have done in the past, instead rode to the fort and proposed a joint patrol of Cheyenne warriors and cavalry soldiers. The collaboration was unprecedented, and when the raiding party saw the united front, they retreated without violence. It was a small victory, but it represented everything Sarah and Tahatan's marriage stood for. Proof that cooperation was possible, that peace could be more than just a hopeful dream. That night, as they lay together in their lodge with Sarah nestled against Tahatan's broad chest, she traced the scars on his skin, each one a story of survival and strength. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Marrying me? Choosing this path of peace over the warrior's way you've always known?" Tahatan's arms tightened around her, his lips pressing against her hair. His English had improved dramatically, and he spoke with only a slight accent now. "Regret? No, my heart. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms, that the bravest battles are not always fought with weapons. You have given me hope for a future I could not have imagined. Every day with you is a gift I treasure." Sarah tilted her face up to kiss him softly. "I love you," she whispered. "I didn't think I could. Didn't think it was possible to love someone I was forced to marry. But I do. I love you with everything I am." "And I love you," Tahatan replied, the words still somewhat unfamiliar on his tongue but no less sincere. "You are my wife, my partner, my greatest treasure. You are the peace I have been seeking all my life, not the peace of treaties and negotiations, but the peace of a heart that has found its home." As winter gave way to spring, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy to both communities, a symbol of the new life and new possibilities their union represented. Tahatan was attentive and protective, almost comically so, hovering over Sarah as her belly grew round with their child. She teased him gently about his overprotectiveness, but secretly she loved his concern, the way his hand would rest on her stomach feeling for their baby's movements, the wonder in his eyes at the miracle of the life they had created together. Their daughter was born on a clear summer morning, her first cries announcing her arrival to a world that was already better for the peace her parents had helped create. They named her Hope in English and Morning Star in Cheyenne, a child who belonged to both worlds and would grow up knowing the best of each culture. As Sarah sat in their lodge cradling their newborn daughter while Tahatan looked on with an expression of pure love and wonder, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had been forced into this marriage, had been terrified and resistant, had seen Tahatan as nothing more than the feared war chief of legend. But life, she had learned, had a way of surprising you. Sometimes the paths we resist most strongly are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. "What are you thinking, my heart?" Tahatan asked, settling beside her and gently stroking their daughter's downy black hair. Sarah smiled up at him, this man who had become her everything, her partner, her love, her home. "I'm thinking about legends," she said softly, "about how they told me you were fearsome and dangerous, a warrior to be feared. They never mentioned that beneath that fierce exterior beat the heart of a man capable of such deep love, such tenderness, such strength of character. They made you into a legend, but they missed the most important part of who you are." Tahatan leaned down to kiss her forehead, then his daughter's. "And what part is that?" "That you're capable of the greatest courage of all," Sarah replied. "The courage to choose love over hate, peace over war, hope over fear. The courage to let someone into your heart, even when everything in your world told you it was dangerous. The courage to be vulnerable. That's the real legend of Tahatan, the Windhawk, the war chief who found something worth fighting for that had nothing to do with battle and everything to do with building a future." As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Tahatan held his wife and daughter close, his heart full of a contentment he had never thought possible. The legends would continue to speak of the feared Cheyenne war chief and the colonel's daughter who were forced to wed, but those who truly knew them, who witnessed the love that had blossomed between them, understood the real story. It was a tale of two people who had been thrust together by circumstances beyond their control, but who had chosen to see beyond fear and prejudice to find something rare and precious. They had found love in the most unlikely place, had built a bridge between two worlds, and in doing so had created a legacy that would endure long after the legends faded. Their love had become the foundation for lasting peace, proof that even in the harshest circumstances, the human heart's capacity for love and understanding could triumph. And as they sat together, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, both Tahatan and Sarah knew that they had found something more valuable than all the treaties and negotiations in the world. They had found each other, and in doing so, had found home.